when there is such an intense profit motive, how can we ever trust it? And that is the recurring theme throughout The Lone Gunmen.
Right.
And that is also I think one of the real messages when you watch that particular episode. It's to make you think about questions like that.
Power, greed, all of those dark energies and how that all coalesces.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
No, but my question would be is, at the end it seemed that with you working with the therapist, that the truth comes from within.
Right.
So all these questions that everyone's asking about how can we see the truth in these big corporations, and she's telling you all this is a mirror of a truth of yourself.
Right.
Were you floored by that, about your internal journey, about how
Well,
we may create the things we're seeing and not realize we're doing it?
funny that you should say that, because I can bring that back to my improv comedy training. In fact, that it is an internal process that creates the scenes that you see, because we are improvising from nothing. You get a couple audience suggestions, and suddenly we're in Kate Williams' bedroom having an argument, so these become realities on stage for me, so that these are internal things that I then reflect outwards. So it wasn't that difficult of a leap to go that then an evil corporation can come from my own internal psyche, because, I ran Chopac for a while.
The thing though is that more than once, quite a few times,
Yes.
and in that rather honest moment that you have towards the end of the film, and deriding your own lack of organizational skills repeatedly.
Twice.
And one of the things that draws you to conspiracy theories is your love of the idea that there are these super organized people.
How do they do that? What's their filing system like? It must be incredible.
And that's that element of projection that,
Yes.
we
That is true, right?
right,
Yeah.
and that for anyone to have organization, it lets you off the hook for not having organizational skills.
Yeah.
Because if anyone does, well, look what they must be doing with it.
Right. They're evil. They're evil with that kind of ABC system. What the hell?
We've gotten to at least one truth. The organized are evil.
It's indexed. Yeah, the Dewey Decimal System. I like that.
Let's have another conversation.
Like mine, like financially successful filmmakers are not artists.
So Dean, you don't think that Don Rumsfeld was sitting somewhere in the Pentagon watching the X-Files in March of 2001, knowing he had a crisis coming and thought, that's it, that's the way we're going to handle it? You
How
don't think that was
terrifying
it?
would that be?
How terrifying would that be? Because,
If you'd actually inspired it.
well, here's the thing that we didn't find, Mr. Alex Lightman, who was writing a book about the connection between Al-Qaeda and Hollywood. And he came to me at San Diego Comic-Con going, hey, Lone Gunman, hey, I'm writing a book, and I was with some top-level Al-Qaeda guys, and they had 4 or 5 game plans, and they were watching The Lone Gunman. And they said from that pilot episode that they were on to that plan, so they pushed that plan forward to make that their A game to run that. And I was like, great. Yeah, that's, but I find that also either he was pulling my leg or that
However, there were several other projects that dealt with a very similar theme and very similar topics. In fact, I was doing I used to direct behind-the-scenes documentaries about the making of different films. And one film that I was brought on to do a behind-the-scenes documentary of in summer of 2002 was a film that was called Panic, Air Panic, Grounded. I mean, it had different titles in every country trying to give it some sort of traction. Because the film was about hijacked airliners being flown by terrorists into the tallest buildings around the world. And they finished the film. The mix and the final print was delivered on September 10th, 2001. The director got on a flight to go to Eastern Europe to start his next film the next day. He walks into the hotel to see on the TV the horrible events that were unfolding, and he gets very upset and demands to speak to the owner of the hotel to find out how they got a copy of his movie. And this film didn't get released for a while, and this company often made movies like this. And it was a time in distribution where there were companies that would make films that basically were entirely funded and entirely entirely distributed to Eastern Bloc and to certain countries that were too poor to ever be able to buy major studio blockbusters. So they would buy this kind of film. And it was very interesting interviewing the heads of this company about this because, they were for a good few months really shaken about the kind of messages and ideas their films had been giving out and had been sending out. That that questioning period didn't last much after 3 months, and they went right back to it because they're in business to stay in business. But that was the thing. The other thing about Donald Rumsfeld in particular I thought was really interesting, we were asked about this when we did a little preview screening just before the film was done in February, but Donald Rumsfeld had just been asked about Building 7. Do you remember this?
Yes, I do.
And he said, "What's Building 7?" And all these people immediately, without having seen him say it, just hearing the reports of it, automatically said, "Oh, that liar, how can you believe it?" And I said, or he's never heard of Building 7, which actually reveals maybe an even bigger problem that we don't want to look at.
Yes, exactly. That there's not disinformation, there's just no information.
Question, please.
Please, yes, you're good.
Thank you for making that film. I saw at the end something about ancient mysteries.
Yes.
Now, when I was growing up, like many people, there was a copy of Eric von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods, like the aliens, they built the pyramids, or they sunk Atlantis, or did both at the same time, and had something to do with the Aztecs and everybody else. And that sort of prehistory conspiracy theory.
Right.
I was totally taken in by it as a kid, and I'm hoping that there's something along those lines in your upcoming film, or perhaps there was also the guy called Lobsang T. Rampa, who was actually a plumber from Surrey, who then wrote a bunch of books about how he was really a reincarnated Tibetan mystic with a third eye, and that he'd been to Tibet and into a cave full of strange machinery. He wrote a whole series of these books.
Oh, I missed this
and
series.
some of them were I picked up my Uncle Jerry, who was sitting next to me.
Oh, is that right?
Here. Yeah,
Did this guy
that's-
continue to do plumbing after that?
The point is that there's a whole raft of this stuff.
Right.
This
Yes.
almost a tide, and I'm hoping that some of it will be represented in your next film.
We think so. We are, there was a lot that we actually left out. William Henry, for instance, we had a fabulous interview with him, and a few others that were pertaining more to this ancient
Mark
wisdom.
Bennett talking about the Ark of the Covenant.
Ah, yes, of course. yeah.
I'm fascinated, again, I don't know how other documentarians work. I like having a question in mind and moving forward and trying to say yes to what comes forward. The question that I would have in mind in this one would be the question about how we lose track of knowledge so easily once we've attained it. And what happens to it, and why do we lose it? And I'm not just speaking over long spans of time. I mean, I'm speaking even within my own lifetime. I mean, I'm constantly learning something and then realizing, oh, wait a minute, I knew that when I was a kid. Why was I so much smarter then? And, so I'm fascinated by that. I'm fascinated from how we gain knowledge and then lose it.
And they go away. Like, why did everybody forget about my spin-off?
It's something that they put in the water.
Is it?
Well, of course.
That's what Elliot, yes, the Soma.